This is Where Dragons Die, written by the novelist Ash. Chapter 4, Silent Plans. Mia always struck Basil as one of the most elegant beauties in Feather's Breath, but common sense told him not to pursue her. She was grandniece to Jester Quilborn, Archdomador of Law. Basil's job was at the mercy of this woman's family, and the future of his career with it. One glance too lurid, one pass too forceful, and his career was over. Despite the taboo, or maybe because of it, he was drawn to her. How was he supposed to sit with a woman who wore a dark violet dress so well and not look? Here was a woman of grace, a lady who could make a top knot and glasses look like high fashion. And Basil would be remiss to let this opportunity pass him by. Common sense was for common men. Let them worry about their careers. Basil was going to win this woman's heart. "Again, I must apologize, Demivas Pepperborn," Mia said with her feather-soft voice. "I understand how unusual it must be to have an Edler making requests of you. It's just that our family would like to keep this within our purview. I assure you that our family will find a punishment fitting for Carrick, but we would like to handle it discreetly. I'm not sure how much you know about Carrick, but he's had a difficult time adjusting ever since his childhood friend was conscripted to the Order. We're no less happy about his behavior today than anyone else, but making a big show of his punishment would only reflect badly on the family and the Chamber of Justice as a whole." Basil was so enthralled with the words rolling off her lips that he forgot every line as soon as it formed. There was purpose in her pause, and Basil's admiring eyes only coaxed Mia's irritation. She got Basil's attention with a tilt of her eyebrow. Basil straightened. "I understand discretion, Edler Mia." Basil gave an amiable grin. "I wouldn't have bothered, but an Edler of Fire brought the issue to my attention. I'm not the kind of person to ignore a cry for help, even if I'm off duty. If your brother is the cause of future inconveniences, should I contact you directly?" Basil needed to be professional, but he couldn't help himself. If Mia wanted a husband, there would be no shortage of high-ranking men offering her their wrists. Yet the woman was 23 and made no plans to debut. She wasn't looking for a husband, and that matched Basil's ideology perfectly. Experience told Basil that women like that hadn't known romance, so they felt no need to look. Mia glanced at Basil's unprofessional elbow on the table. Basil straightened again, and Mia stood. "If you'll excuse me, I have a brother to condemn." Without another word, the beauty left his small office. He watched her go, hoping every sensual movement of her hips was meant for him. Lavender perfume lingered in the air. Mia's parting gift. She didn't want marriage. That above all else kept popping into his mind. It was silly. He should be thinking about her coy smile, shapely body, and intelligent eyes, but he wasn't. Mia and he had that in common. The thought gave him a dangerous hope. He stood to close the door to an adjoining office and found Hound Dusklin standing by the threshold. He mocked Basil with a wry smile, fitting for his long, angular face. "Basil, I know you think the ancient yellow worm is up there singing songs about your skills of romance, but that's one girl you're going to have to let go," Hound cautioned. "This from a man who can't keep himself presentable?" Basil raised a brow. Hound's tired eyes followed Basil's gaze down to his hands. His fingers carried more ink than a quill. Upset, he retrieved a wet rag from his desk. "Once I'm Grand Edler of Transcription, I'll have my pick of debuting women." Hound puffed up his chest. "But Mia Quilborn won't be one of them. Devaneros has been courting her for years, and from what I've heard, he's pretty close to her family. Competition doesn't worry me." Basil swept his offhand, palm down, to cut through the issue. Hound chuckled and shook his head. "You should be. He works with her at the Hall of Learning, and the two of them are inseparable. I hear the only reason they're not married is because of her brother, Carrick. That boy hasn't worked a day in his life." Basil recognized the baseless rumor for what it was. He was grabbing his hat and coat. "She's not married yet." Smirking, his friend shook his head. Basil put on his feathered hat. The long yellow feather offset the green-dyed leather and brought out the freckles in Basil's cheeks. "Your problem is that you care too much about protocol and social norms." "Of course, I'm a demivas. You should be more concerned with the law yourself. You see that request for armament from Viceroy Antonio Springtide?" Posturing. Basil turned off the wall sconce in his office. It's more than that. Put it to Quill. Stormblade is preparing for war. Hound got his things together. Back to what's important. Unmarried women are allowed to have secrets. This is the modern age, my friend. Nowadays, women aren't just learning about love from literature and drunken gossip. There are romance rooms, handsome servants, and of course the high-class bars. Basil spoke luridly, his meaning clear. Hound flicked off the wall sconce and followed Basil into the halls. Those places are magnets for up-jumping merchants, trying to capture men with babies. Not so, Basil countered. Many new establishments are breaking away from their poor reputation. Did you know that Feather's Breath has not one, but 2 dragon-exclusive bars? The Drinking Lion is 3 towers over. That initiate den? Hound scoffed. Basil held the door open for Hound. Initiates aren't married. The Demi-Vas were walking through a large open room full of initiates, so Hound held his tongue. Boys and girls aged 16 to their mid-20s worked with nervous fervor at 4-person tables. Inked quills moved over the parchment with an incessant scratch. Everyone was working for the great honor of becoming a Demi-Vas, but less than 1 in 20 would make it. One of the red-haired hopefuls from Silent Scythe smiled brightly and waved at Basil. He responded with a coy tilt of his head. Not exactly me a Quillborn, Hound mumbled. Basil waited until they were out of earshot and asked, You'd turn her down? Hound blushed. Wall-hugging stairs brought the duo to a room large enough to cover the full length of the tower. Curved windows stood between the personal offices of the tower's Vassans, granting precious natural light in the dusk hours of the day. Around the Vassans did the real planning and politicking of the workforce. Vassans reviewed notes, dictated to initiates, and yelled in the conference room. The frantic energy gave Basil and Hound no pause, and they made their way to the signing table. Nearby enforcers kept track of who was coming and going, checking visitors for weapons as much as the lowborn dared. Basil, came the tenor voice of a woman standing in the threshold of her office. The lady was Vassan Cressy Timberton, Basil's direct superior. Even around the office, she wore expensive dresses that illustrated her power and status as the wife of Domador Levins Timberton. The woman was middle-aged, but gained sophistication rather than wrinkles as the years passed. Knowledgeable of this, the Vassan wore a form-fitting green dress. Basil turned to Hound. Another time. Hound nodded sympathetically. He'd been chewed out by the Vassans enough times to know that Basil wouldn't be joining him anytime soon. Cressy's long brown hair felt like silk in Basil's hand. The collected strands writhed free of his fingers, tickling his face. His lips moved from the base of her neck to encroach upon her ear. Stifled gasps lingered in Cressy's throat. He pulled her closer, the shape of her back curving against his chest. You're taking a risk, Cressy cautioned. It's too public here. The door's locked, the curtains are drawn. Basil returned his attention to her neck, kissing as he pleased. I didn't call you in here for this. Despite her protest, she allowed his kisses and twisted her arms back to clutch his chin-length hair. You could stop me any time. She didn't, of course. Cressy was too busy trying not to moan to say anything. Basil continued to kiss her neck, his hands feeling the curves of her body. He was there because she wanted him. Suddenly she turned around and grabbed his head with both hands. Cressy's blue eyes dashed back and forth with conflict before she came at him. She kissed him deep and long. His heart swelled, his breath quickened, and he pushed back to meet her passions. She risked her marriage to be with him, her career. He was a man worth fighting for. He was. As quick as she started, Cressy stopped, pulling back to rest her forehead against his. Basil's labored breaths made it difficult to stay quiet. He inhaled and slid her dress up. Cressy put her hand gently on his wrist to stop him. Cressy separated and swallowed. There's too much to do. Come back to me tonight. All right. Basil kept his tone from growing petulant. Stroking his goatee absently, he asked, What's this about, then? She gave a little cough to push her mind back into work mode. My husband needs to talk to you about something. There's something important going on, and he's calling in a favor. Oh, your favor. Potted plants broke up the white stone. A central rug portrayed the ancient yellow worm in flight, and a single triptych illustrated a silent dragon helping farmers labor. It had nothing to do with Cressy. She was a woman born to Stormblade, a whelp who spent her youth on boats, a person who was at home by the sea. Now she lived in landlocked Feather's Breath, clad in green, forbidden to wear blue for fear that she showed displeasure at a marriage she hated. Basil thought of another woman who grew up in the field and wondered how she felt to dress in blue. Now I'm flying in thin air. I'm sorry, Basil, but I do have to play the role of your superior from time to time, she chuckled. Basil tossed his long hair. He retrieved his hat from a chair. What do I need to do? Grand Edler Quaid Bitterman is hosting a spirit tasting. Levins is trying to impress the Mancier into funding an academy. The party is open invite, but it would be rude to show up empty-handed. I recommend a safe ice wine. Levins will explain what he needs from you there. Cressy. Basil reached out to touch her face. The older woman let his hand land upon her cheek, but she stopped him again. Finish this. It was barely a whisper, but her tone said it all. Then come back to me. Basil nodded and left the room without a kiss or show of affection. She wanted him to be all business, and so he was. Basil arrived with a traditional potato still from the northern nation of Sojourn. The spirit was ludicrously overpriced thanks to rising import costs, so it was well received by the Grand Edler's nephew. The boy might have been 16, but the blue lipstick and white powdered face made him look 13. He was dressed in the snow-kissed fashion popular with the radical youths of Icewall to the north, but it was a rare sight to see in Feather's Breath. The nephew endured Basil's stares with dignity, but Basil supposed the boy would drink the still with his snow-kissed friends in some secret corner of the manor. On the morrow, he'd tell the Grand Edler that Basil showed up empty-handed to spite him. He would give the kid his petty victory. Basil was there to find the Domador, not to make nice with the Edlers. The manor was built from a carved-out widow tree, but used high ceilings and windowed verandas to make it appear larger than it was. It was crowded, but free-flowing spirits kept the highborn pleasantly crammed shoulder to shoulder. Basil suspected that food was going to be hard to come by, and gave up on the idea of having dinner. Eager to get back to Cressy, Basil spent so much time looking up and around that he soon got a crink in his neck. He found a gap by a smaller set of stairs, and stopped to rub out the pain. There he spotted a sight far more exotic than a bottle of rare liqueur. Anna Petalgrow. He hadn't seen Anna since she'd begged him to come back with tears in her eyes. Seeing her again chilled Basil's heart. She looked different, but there was no doubt in Basil's mind. It was Anna. Her gorgeous scarlet hair was cut into a finger-length pixie cut, popular with women serving the crown's dragon and bored wives. As a girl, she wore a rosy-cheeked smile wherever she went, but now her gaunt face carried the apathetic look of Basil's colleagues. These changes Basil could deal with, but the dress of blue and 2 yellow eels twining around her figure cut him deep. She really was married. Anna's sapphire eyes met his, and for a moment she was scared. Anna recovered quickly, putting that mask of apathy up once more, but Basil had seen her reaction. Anna? Basil stepped towards her. She raised a glass of orange wine to cut off any introduction. Basil was forced to stand there like a fool, waiting for her to finish a bitter-tasting sip. I heard you were coming, she said simply. Basil swallowed to work through the lump in his throat. I didn't. I'm working with Domador Timberton. Anna looked to the people mingling. Have you spoken to him? No, I was just... You should probably take care of that. Anna walked away. Anna. Basil grabbed her arm right above her blue silk gloves. She turned and looked at him with such ferocity that Basil's words died in his throat. The manner that she turned was so sudden that it quieted the room. Basil released her. You will watch your actions, Pepperborn, Anna rebuked. I am not your friend, and you have no right to be so familiar with me. Do I make myself clear? Basil nodded and looked to a nearby vase. A long yellow dragon coiled around its width. Yes, Petalgrow. It is Eelside, and you would do well to remember that. Basil stood there like a child. His eyes kept moving up and down the vase as he thought of something to say to her. But when he looked back, she was gone. Dejected, Basil asked one of the patrons about the Domador, and found him quickly. The city's Domador was stashed away in a study, accessed through a door under a set of stairs. Statues of common animals broke up the endless tomes. Wall sconces cast eerie shadows over the bones of small animals that decorated every table. Behind the main desk, a completed fieldjack skeleton stood like a sentry. The hollow slots of its rabbit-like skull stared at Basil. This imposing figure did nothing to chill him, not when Domator Levens Timberton was sitting at the desk. He wasn't doing anything threatening, merely fingering some old volume. But Basil felt a fear greater than any deer evading a jack. Basil moved a chair opposite to Timberton. The Domador gave a single grunt to acknowledge the demivas. He finished reading a passage and slowly took his reading glasses off his gray, balding head. "Pepperborn, I'm shocked to see you. I was beginning to think that my wife never got the message," the Domador said with a dry wit. Basil forced a chuckle. "It's all me. I had enough trouble finding you in this icicle of a house." The mockery of himself in the rival house brought a crooked grin to Timberton's lips. Behind his gray mustache, gold fillings reflected the yellow light of the sconces. "Your wife said it was important? We're safe here." "Safe from ears that matter," Levens Timberton said with confidence. "Do you know why I called you here?" Basil shook his head. "Because you owe me a debt. There are very few things that can be trusted in this world, and leverage is one of them. When you came to me as an initiate, you expressed a concern about your mother's low birth. I arranged the killing of her dragon, garnered sympathy, and created a network of nobles who have come to rely on your mother's expertise as an edler of carpentry. I hear she might even be a grand edler given time." Timberton chuckled at the irony and pulled a cigar out of a fine red wooden case. "None complained when I named you Demivas, nor have there been any whispers of your low birth in some time. I've been more than generous considering." Basil forced an appreciative smile. He leaned forward and lit Timberton's cigar with a match. "I appreciate that, Domator." The old man nodded and puffed at the dead leaves. Once lit, Timberton let out a heavy cloud of smoke into Basil's face. Basil swished out the match. "Now the time has come for you to repay that debt. I need you to be discreet about this. There will be no honor obtained. This won't be a problem for you, will it?" Basil shook his head, lowering it as he did. "No, Domator." "Good." He gave a few long puffs, letting the rich smoke fill the air. "Fire Arrow is moving against Stormblade. 2 nights previous, there was a raid on several manors in Conquest. Only 1 man died in the escape. Some witnesses there saw the thieves heading west towards Raftmer. But I know that the attacking Fire Arrow was shot from my city's quiver." "The Red Tails," Basil said with certainty, prompting a nod from Timberton. "I have evidence of their atrocity, but I don't want to get the Order involved. Rest assured their time will come. Silent Scythe is patient, and our patience will drive those fire arrows into the ground." The Domador's fury matched his volume. "If I'm not looking for evidence, then what am I looking for?" "You're looking for evidence, just not of their crime. This is why you're in law. You spend too much time looking at the leaves to see the forest, just like that painting of a wife I have. Blind raids into the city. Any city couldn't uncover information. The Red Tails attacked Conquest, and Conquest in particular, because someone told them to. Their family has no influence there. Someone from Stormblade is selling information to a source inside my city. They might have a background from Conquest, an old lover from Stormblade. I trust you to learn the particulars. It goes without saying that they're connected to the Red Tails, maybe a family member themselves." "Is there anything else I need to know?" Basil pried as delicately as he dared. "What little more information there is will come from your partner." Timberton paused. "Anna Eelside will be working with you while she's down here for her first cousin's debut. Her husband is Fife-Roy of the Northern Riverland Fife, and I'm told she has contacts in Conquest. I've also heard that you have some kind of history with her, some sort of fledgling go-around before the wings were full, eh?" Levens gave a lurid smile. Basil couldn't, no matter how he tried, force himself to smile. Instead, he responded without humor. "Something like that." Timberton's face soured. "Well, make sure that any personal matters don't get in the way of this. We are on a very tight schedule. And Blaise wants this handled before things escalate to war." "Blaise?" Yes, King Blaze, Timberton snorted. Don't act so damn awestruck. It's not as if you're going to meet the man. Now get to it. Basil stood up. Domitor Timberton, this mission might need me to travel. As a demi-vas of Feather's Breath, there would be little reason for me to spend so much time away from the city. Should I? Basil voiced his concern carefully before Timberton cut him off. You have a sister, Timberton said dismissively. If the need for you to travel arrives, she'll debut. No one could blame a brother for wanting to see his sister properly wed. Basil's sister was 15, and hadn't even decided on which of the Order's tests she was going to take to come of age. Debuting lasted a year to the day, and if at the end of that time a lady hadn't declared her betrothed, there was little chance of ever being wed. Of course, Basil said with a smile. He crossed his hands over his chest with a straight back. He brought his eyes skyward and held it there as the elder carelessly puffed his cigar. The thick cloud of smoke trailed up to the skeleton of the 7-foot-tall Jack. The flickering sconces cast skew shadows around the hollow eyes. Basil made his exit, consumed with rage-filled thoughts of how he would take Timberton's wife in the old man's bed. And Basil? Timberton stopped when his hand reached the handle. Yes, Domitor. Never mind. Curiously, he returned his attention to his book. Basil was finally released. The Domitor's favors always came at a price, and every year the cost to Basil became steeper. If he didn't find the Stormblade spy quickly, the Domitor would send him to Blue Light, First Blade, Kelp Tier, and anywhere else he thought might get information. If his sister's life happened to be ruined in that process, what did the Domitor care? The selfish tyrant was doing all of this to save face, and remembering that made it easier for Basil to help a married woman break her vows. Thank you for listening to Where Dragons Die. The book is available in Kindle and softcover, and includes illustrations and an appendix to build out the world of Dragonguard. We hope you'll return to listen to Chapter 5.